What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Crush This Monster Truck Podcast. My name is Bradshaw, also known as the Monster Truck Canucker. And guys, this is going to be an awesome episode. It is an all-Canadian, all-Albertan episode. Tonight we have Mr. Don Frankish on the episode, an icon and legend in Canadian monster trucks and in monster trucks in general. You know, he was the one that created Maniac and that amazing Jurassic Attack that we see now being campaigned by Team Throttle Monster. We're going to get into all that. But before we go into our episode here, guys, just a couple of housekeeping items. Crush This, we've been around for almost 10 years, and, we've had some amazing support and amazing sponsors. And one of the biggest ones we've ever had is J Concepts. And, we have a code with them now. J Concepts, we had Mike Letcher and Jessica Dahl last week. And, they're sponsored by J Concepts. Cheech is sponsored by them. Our buddy Josh Rhodes, Dig is sponsored by them. So go check out J Concepts. We have our code there. Use code CRUSHTHIS at jconcepts.net for 15% off all items. That's bodies, tires, you name it, they have it. So go check out J Concepts, Fred Reap, and Jason Rona, what they are doing there. Go check out Monster Truck Attitude, our buddy Steve Jones. You see it on the bottom right there on their little ticker. Monster Truck Attitude on Facebook and YouTube. Thursday Night Thunder. They've been doing some kind of, monthly events. I think Cheech won the last one, I believe. So that is Diecast Monster Truck Racing. So if you're into that stuff, go check that out. Steve has an awesome product. We love working with him, and he's such a great dude. Also, check out limslikeme.org. We had Cole Venard on a couple months ago, and he was plugging that. It's his organization to help people that are needing prosthetics. Go check out limslikeme.org or email lminfo@limslikeme.org. Another thing, go check out Bryce Kenny's book, Geared for Life. He was just in Calgary. I wasn't able to make to that show, which was unfortunate. I wanted to go help out the Team Throttle Monster boys again, but sometimes life gets in the way. But go check out his book, Geared for Life, Making a Shift into Your Full Potential. I've read it. Cheech has read it. It's an amazing book. And guys, go check out our spread shop. I know we've been saying for about 2 years now, new designs are coming, but they are, I promise. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of this podcast, and we got some really cool stuff coming to you guys for next year. Working on a new logo for the podcast and so many other things. So go check that out. Hey, my brother's watching on Twitch, so that's cool. We're also on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. Thank you for all the 5-star likes and reviews on the audio episodes on anywhere you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever they're on now. But guys, we are going to get into our interview with Don Frankish. We're going to play our normal intros, and we will get into it. So guys, stay tuned.
This isn't your typical motorsports podcast. You're listening to Crush This, a monster truck podcast presented by High Octane Coffee and J Concepts. A show where we take you inside the minds of your favorite drivers, past and present, of the monster truck industry. And now, your hosts, Bradshaw and Dan Chichagash. Buckle in. The show starts now.
And again, once again, guys, welcome back to a new episode. If you're wondering where Cheech is, he is currently in Oklahoma for the Oklahoma State Fair with Ram. So he's a busy guy. They're there for 10 days. He's been there for, I think, 3 or 4 days at this point. So if you're in Oklahoma or around that area, go check out Cheech. They're doing car crushes there and everything. But with me tonight is, like I said, he is a icon. I call him an icon and a legend of Canadian monster trucks, Mr. Don Frankish. Don, how's it going tonight, bud?
Great. Glad to be here.
Well, we've had you on a couple times, and you know, I can't remember the last time. We definitely have had you on for a roundtable. I think we had like Dan Patrick, Gene Patterson, yourself. I think we've had you on for a solo episode, but it's been a long time. So you know, the thing I want to start off with, you know, you are the mastermind behind the Maniac name and creating that wild Jurassic Attack, which has now been campaigned by Team Throttle Monster for the last couple of years. And, you know, how did all that come about to, you know, transfer the name and likeness and everything over to them, and then creating your own new identity for your ride truck that you run here in Alberta?
Well, the idea of running the Jurassic name again on a race truck actually had been in the works when Gary Schott Jr. left our team. He was building his own new truck. He had it a couple of years, and he actually had the original body that went to Europe, the second brown one, at his shop probably for 10 years. We kind of had left it there from bringing it from out east, and so there was kind of a concept of putting it on that truck originally, and then he sold off, and we kept the idea open. We'd already thought of the paint job and things we wanted to include in it, even when Gary was around, and it just kept going from there. It never found the right fit. I didn't want it to be on anything but a top-notch team with top exposure being the main thing to add value. So, it was through Craig Christensen. I got to go race over in Australia a few times, and me and a buddy were racing over there right before COVID shut Alberta down. We got home the same day it shut down, so we almost got stuck over there. That was the day Paul texted me about the idea, and I don't know, there was some connection there between Paul and Craig in Australia. The timing maybe affected my decision a little. I'd always really, really been impressed with their equipment. They were up in Rad Torque a couple years earlier, and I really liked that kamikaze truck when it runs a Raptor body, and I just was impressed with the design. You can look at some chassis and they work, and you look at others and you're like, well, I wouldn't even attempt that, but it just fit. And then so we started a deal, and it was a lease deal, and I wasn't greedy. I just wanted a percentage of some merch, and let's see how it fits. And it fit fabulous. They got the paint job designed and Raptor, and it was pretty much everything we had hoped for. And he come to me once, and he says, I really dig this. I kind of want to buy it out. And I'm like, no, not till you've experienced it after COVID. When you go to a pit party and you see the lineups are almost equal to Gravedigger, let's talk then. And so he called back another year later, and we were much more on the same page. And, we just both said, let's make this work somehow. And I'm so thrilled where it went. There's so many big name trucks that have just been on, I think, terrible chassis over the years. I remember seeing Taurus once, and it wasn't even the right color or anything, and the paint on the side looked like it had been spray bombed, and I'm like, it just made you sad. And I'm just glad went to a good home, top truck. It will continue to grow. It could have just sat in a cornfield and you know what I mean? It just went to the right home.
I remember when Paul and Mike came up for that Rad Torque show. It was 2019. And I remember even just seeing their trucks at that point, and man, I was impressed. And they've had some amazing drivers that truck. So lately they've had Tim Hall Jr. in the now blue Jurassic Attack, and then Dalton Widener. He has been such an amazing driver, and that truck fits him so well. He got to compete in that truck at World Finals, and talk about seeing how Dalton and Tim have been kind of making that name, their own in a way in the industry. With Tim, bringing it to the four-wheel jamboree this past weekend in Indy, and then Dalton at the World Finals.
Yeah, it's pretty cool seeing it go to Indy. I attended that event over 30 years ago, and it was Lee Springs, and trying to jump 10 cars was a big deal. And it was one of them, like, it'd be cool to go there, but just too far out of our range for that time of year. We usually had a lot of West Coast stuff in September, so it was never a practical reality for us to ever do that. So it's awesome to see it go out there. It's great seeing them both kind of in their own identity of that truck, so they can each make their own name. It doesn't, look the same from truck to truck. And yeah, we got to hang out with them guys in Calgary this weekend, and he won the overall up there on Sunday. I don't know how he did Saturday, but that was the first time meeting him and the crew, and they just do a phenomenal job of representing their whole team. And me and Paul actually probably have known each other for 20 plus years too. We used to race quite a bit when he was with Craig's camp there running the Spider-Man truck. And yeah, we even have some pretty good laughs out of them old days still.
When Tim did the Edmonton show, I tried to get into an Albertan flag, because I even though those trucks are now based in Utah, to me, they'll always be from right here in Alberta, I'm still very prideful of that, the names that you've created are still running in the industry, and it doesn't matter where they're located now, they'll always be from Alberta in my heart.
Yeah, and both our old chassis are still out there going strong too.
Yeah, I think that Geronimo truck is your old Maniac chassis, I believe.
Yeah,
and that truck's still running strong. I don't know what's the old Jurassic chassis running as now.
It's Maniac out of Oregon there. Dave Smith's the guy's name. I met him once in Vegas, but don't really know him well. But it's still the same setup. I see it every now and then on YouTube, and I kind of cringe because the ride height's too high, but that's just me.
Well, there's a lot of trucks that have run crazy, weird ride heights. I know the one that I always look at that I'm like, why does it run so high, is always Rap Attack, Dave Rappage. That thing is just it's such a weird truck.
Yeah. And, some guys set them up that way just for freestyle. Like, I know when I drove Jurassic in Europe, it was a Feld chassis, and they're like, you're not gonna probably win racing in a truck you've never drove in your life, but you're gonna have fun in freestyle. We know that, so they cranked the ride height up a little bit there, just so you got more on the cushion end. But I kind of prefer to tune my own stuff so that it works both ways, but it's changed a lot since then too.
Well, and speaking of Europe, Mr. Chad Tingler is in watching tonight, and he says, I love running with Don back in the day. I did a lot of shows with him. I was at that one international show. He had the crazy save. And let's talk about that, because that was one, like, I remember when I seen that footage for the first time, pardon my French, guys, I was like, holy shit. Like a monster truck shouldn't do that. And you did. Talk about, that experience going overseas with Jurassic Attack and the fan reaction you got then, and talk about that insane moment, because that broke the internet at that point.
Yeah, that was a pretty good couple of weekends. We went there. We went to Amsterdam and stuff, and we had a blast. I mean, me and Adam and Kreml, we just acted like a bunch of kids, actually. Had a good time wherever we went, causing trouble, but nothing serious, just good old fun. And when we got to the shows over there, I kind of had the mindset of, it's still my body. I got to fix it if it gets destroyed or whatever. But I wanted to run really hard, put on a show. And I actually found that track a little boring at first because it's just kind of a big jump you can hit a couple different ways. So then I decided, well, we got to switch something up here and just go for it. And while it was, sidewalling, I'm like, I still own this body. I still got to fix it. And I thought I was actually gone, but I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can to bring it back. And it just turned out to be an incredible landing. And even after I was done and been interviewed, I didn't know that the scores were all 30s at the time. So, I see a few other trucks go over and I'm like, oh, they're going to take the lead. They're going to beat me. And no, I guess, it seemed like the crowd appreciated the save more than the crashing over there. A little different mindset, I guess. And nowadays, crashing can still be a save, where back then a save meant, the body didn't get damaged. But it was a great time. The whole 2 weekends we were out there was incredible, and a moment I'll never forget. I think Kreml probably had a lot to do with getting me over there, and I thank him for that. But it was nonstop fun from, you're grinning ear to ear for 2 weeks straight kind of thing.
Well, and I think that, like, and I've brought this up during other podcasts we've had, is the camaraderie in the sport. Like you and me have been, I've been able to see you drive when I was younger, and now to call you a friend and somebody that, like you let me drive your ride truck back in, I think it was 2022. It's that camaraderie in this sport. And I think that's something special, and you talked about Frank. We've had him on the podcast a couple of times. Such an awesome dude to talk to. And, it's good to see him still out and about. But talk about the camaraderie between, the drivers and the crew guys, because I think that's such a very special bond. And other motorsports have that, but I feel like Monster Trucks is a little bit different with that.
Yeah, I'd say a little bit. Deep down, it's a show must go on mentality. You'll borrow anything you can to anybody that's in the pits, or send your crew guy over, they'll come help you. And it's always been that way. It's always been about the show and putting it on in front of people. And, and then after having fun and having a beer, don't really care who won or lost at the end of the night. It's nice to have bragging rights and maybe make the other guy buy the beer or something, but it's not life and death, I got a winner, I'm going to be broke next week kind of thing. And we travel with so many good guys, like Chad commenting there. We had so many good times just going from shows to shows. And, you're a Metallica fan. We seen Metallica 3 times like they were following us from show to show. So we'd do our show, pack up, hang around an extra day, and get free tickets to Metallica at the time. It was awesome. And there's been other concerts along the way. And yeah, you travel as a team, whether it doesn't matter where you're at,
One thing that I always like, the state of Canadian monster trucks, years ago out west, it was yourself. It was your guys' team. And I think that was kind of basically about it. You had Marvin Anderson, and, I think that was just you guys out here. But, throughout the last couple of years, a lot of teams have popped up. You obviously have the Roughneck and Crew Behavior team. Those guys always know they're going to send it no matter what. They're going to put their shit back together. I've seen those guys smash their trucks up, drink beer, fix their truck all night, and they're back at it. I still remember it was the what show was that? Bonneville. I still remember that weekend, and Jason destroying the front end out of his truck after that racing pass. And I was sleeping at the camp by the track, and they were up half the night putting that thing back together. And then, out in the East, you have the Como guys and Pat Paquette and Extreme Jim. what do you think of the state of Canadian monster trucks and all that right now, being, how it is?
Oh, I think it's great. We had, some of the Eastern guys at Rad Torque this year, and their equipment looked phenomenal and it ran good. Jason and Jared are always running hard. I've never seen anybody work on trucks as much as they do. I don't know what it is, but they put in a team effort every time. And back in the day, there was Marvin and his two trucks, and Jed, he slowly come into it a few years later, and then Byron Halverson, he was out of Foremost, which used to be my hometown too. He had the Obsession, which changed to Nasty when Rick came out with his. He just decided, I'll change my name. No sense us beating each other over it. And we traveled, the five of us, to a lot of events back then. That was when Kevin Wink was driving for me, and we switched the Leafer Maniac to Young Gun for a season, and then we slowly evolved it into a Jurassic Leaf truck for a season. And then just as we were switching it over to the full gas shocks and 106s and different plantaries and whatnot, that's when Lindsay kind of come into the picture and ran, a couple years with him. There was some pretty big life changes in there for me at the time. We moved from farming to full-time racing and different city. And then, he moved on to Jimmy, and we were happy for him. And Nathan slipped in the next day like nothing had changed. Both those guys, their first shows were either San Diego or Anaheim. Just stick them in front of 60,000 people and let them loose with a truck they've never drove before.
Hey, what a way for your first show. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of my shows that I've been to here in Grand Prairie, your trucks were always at, back, when they did the dirt floor, you always had Cretan's trucks and your trucks. And I've always wanted to know about this. So it was in between when Lindsay went from Cretan to Feld, and you guys were doing a show here in Grand Prairie. Was he there crewing for you guys? I swear to God, he was.
He may have been. I can't recall. I know he was up there crewing for a different event that I couldn't make it to once, but Mike Bell, who used to drive for me, he was filling in a weekend, and Lindsay, I think, was around that weekend crewing. That might have been the one you're thinking of.
Yeah, it was here in Grand Prairie, and I don't think you were driving. You had the blue Jurassic at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm like, wait a second, is that who I'm sitting in the stands? I'm like, is that who I think it is? Like, what the heck? And those shows were always so fun to go to. Here in Grand Prairie, and I mentioned earlier, you were at the first show I was ever at, and talk about. You mentioned when, you went from Young Gun and started building Jurassic Attack. And, we might have talked about this before on the other shows we've had you on, but talk about, the creation of Jurassic Attack. And, because at that point, 3D bodies were starting to become a little bit more popular. You had Snakebite, Samson, I think I don't know how many other 3D bodies are out there, but what made you create Jurassic Attack in that whole concept?
Well, at the time, my brother was actually driving for Bigfoot. And so, we talked a lot, and Snakebite was getting popular. And, I just kind of watched to where it went, whether it was going to catch on or not. And there was parts of that I loved, and parts of it I thought were a little too wrestle-like. But, it works. It's a gimmick, whatever sells shirts. But there was them, and Predator was around, and I think maybe that guy out of Florida.
Jim Jack.
Jim Jack, yeah. But I never really thought of his as all that 3D for some reason, I guess. But I just was watching whether it was going to catch on or not. And at that time, them molds were insanely expensive. They were made down there by, people that build molds for SeaWorld and stuff. And yeah, it's all GTS. But at the time, we'd kind of committed to doing it. And, there comes a day where you're like, holy cow, I'm going to spend a small fortune on this. And I got a letter in the mail that very same day from the Canadian Revenue Agency saying I owed them something like $60,000. And I'm like, oh, I better put the brakes on this idea. And I thought about it for about a day, and I'm like, no, I'm just going to live my life the way I planned it. I'm going to spend this big money on this mold, and if I owe them that money, they can come and get me when they figure it out. So we placed the order, and it took a few months to get done and everything. And about the time we got that body, I got the final result from the audit back, and I think I owed them $600, not $60,000. So, good thing I didn't put all this stress in and put that whole thing on hold, or it may have never happened. But I got the idea. We were headed to an event. I believe it was in Indianapolis, and it was just me, and that was it at the time. I guess I was traveling alone, and Jurassic Park was on a book that was out, and it was on tape. So I bought this tape to help stay awake. And I kept thinking, geez, that'd make a great movie, but unless Spielberg or somebody did it, it would never work. And of course, 10 years later, he does it. But that's where the idea started. As a kid, everybody loved dinosaurs, it seemed anyway, but I just knew it would work. And we had our t-shirt guy do some artwork, and he did a T-Rex originally, because that's everybody's favorite, it seems. And it just looked too alligator-like. It was all head and no body. And he goes, what about this? And he had already drawn up a Triceratops. And we're like, that just fits. It works perfect. And then we got the body up here and mounted and sent it off to, at the time, I didn't really know the guy. I just had a lot of recommendations on airbrushing. And so we took it up to Cross-Eyed Design and Cross-Eyed Airbrushing up in Calgary. And he is, I believe, the best on the planet. He teaches all over the world. He's got, back in the day, he had DVDs and videos out. And now he pretty much does Harleys, and he's just, you can't tell if it's a photo or airbrush sometimes. It's just remarkable, his work. But it was always way too good a quality to belong on a race truck. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. But yeah, he's just phenomenal.
And you see, obviously, with that new T-Rex truck, and then Team Throttle comes out with Velociraptor, to kind of go along with Jurassic Attack, and seeing that body up close, that is insane as well. You got to see the Velociraptor this weekend, and the current iteration of Jurassic Attack. What do you think of what Team Throttle Monster has done with those two?
Well, like when Paul first came out with that, I was like thinking, oh, that might jeopardize our deal. But then I realized, he's got his Bigfoot and his snakebite. He's got the old legend that everybody knows, and then he's got the new guy trying to knock him off. It's really a perfect match, just like Bigfoot and snakebite back in the old days. And we didn't get to see much of Velociraptor by this weekend because he tore it up pretty fast. But we got to see it sitting on the hill for the pit party, and that's about it.
Devin's pretty hard on that stuff. He's very Devin's, becoming one of the fastest rising stars in the sport, and such a good dude. And that whole team, I have nothing but good to say. Their crew guy Mason works his ass off. I seen that dude run his ass off in Rogers Place, and I don't know if he was there this past weekend in Calgary.
Yeah.
Oh, he was. Okay. Mason's such a good dude.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's fun. We hang out with him probably more than anybody on Sunday there before the show.
The thing that I love about those guys and so many other teams is they're fans first and foremost. And I think that's very important. Even like when we've had, Ryan Anderson on and other people from Monster Jam, they're still fans, and I think that's important to have that passion of being a fan in the sport today. Even if you're crewing, driving, designing, it doesn't matter. I think having that fan perspective is very important.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a weak link on some of the more newer drivers that, some chase their dream and get it. Some say that on camera, but really they just got handed an opportunity and took it. But I'm still a firm believer. If you can't rebuild or replace every part on that truck and know how to do it properly, there's always room for improvement. Like Christy's a great example. She learned how to drive a ride truck for several years before she come to us. But at the end, she'd be in the back. We'd go to Tacoma. That's a 5-day torture test to begin with. But it's also the ideal place to test shocks because you can hit the same 5 or 6 jumps, big or small, over and over and over again. And we were there one year and I'm like, do you want to try and change your shocks or do you want to just get through this? And she's like, oh, I think we should try and make it land a little better, And we ended up putting GoPros on every corner of the truck. And we'd go back after, look at the video, go to the trailer, rip shocks apart, and it's already midnight. And we've just done two shows on Friday and 2 on Saturday, or maybe it was 1 Friday, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday, but we just kept changing stuff until that thing landed incredible. And I remember they had a really big motocross lander with like about 5 cars on the land or the open side. And she goes, I'm not going to hit that. I'm going to stay away from it. And I said, yeah, but if something happens and it's in front of you, and you have to hit it hard. Well, she ended up in that situation Sunday, just launched that thing. And it's probably the best picture of that truck I've ever had because it's probably 18, 20 feet up in the air with Gravedigger in the background and stuff. And it's just a phenomenal photo.
Christy was a very good driver. I got to see her drive. I think she did Grand Prairie at one point, and she was very good. She was like when I remember when she debuted. It took her a bit, but she became such a great driver for you.
Yeah, she actually is almost like she's programmable. We'd walk the track, and I'd tell her this and that, and she'd suck it all in and just take it and do exactly what any experienced driver would do, it seemed like. But getting back to the technical side of that is, she could go and tell you what the truck isn't doing right and know where the problem is. And all my drivers were good at that. Nathan's one of the best, I think one of the best drivers and mechanics out there in any of that stuff, NASCAR or monster trucks. But if you look at it as you're just a driver that got hired and you didn't come with that background knowledge, well, you can sit there and go, oh, well, Dennis's truck's better than mine. Why is it better? Well, I don't know, and if you do know, you know what to change and to fix or to try and experiment with. But if you don't, you got nothing to judge off of to improve. And so that, I think that, like you say, that being a pure fan first and a desire goes a long ways.
Oh yeah, like I remember one of my good buddies, Fernando Martinez, who drove El Toro Loco this past year. He was in Edmonton, and I've known Fern doing the online rigs of Raw stuff for many years. And you know, him being from California, he's crewed for a couple teams. You know, Rick Swanson. You know, he'd help out. You know, Bill Payne's team whenever they come close to him, and getting to see him drive this last year, and getting to see any of my homies, like any of my friends, like Cheech, get his opportunities. So many other of my friends. It's so cool to see, and they have that knowledge of the sport. You know what I mean? They, you know, like, even though this was Fern's first year driving, you know, he could sense things and he could see things that not many other rookie drivers could see. Look at MJ Solorio, you know, drove for Bill Payne for a couple of years. Now he's driving the other El Toro Loco. And even like I mentioned, Dan, you know, Cheech, you know, he is like, I remember going to Edmonton 2016 or Calgary 2016 when he was crewing for Lindsay at that show. Lindsay was actually driving Zombie, surprisingly, for that show. And just getting to see his progression from crew guy for Feld, then going in with the independents, landing at Hall Brothers, and now driving the second Ram munition truck. It's so cool to see his progression and in the sport. And, you know, having that background of being a fan, but also being in the industry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That being a crew guy first. I mean, there's so many, you know, Too Tall. Look at how great he did. Just pretty much stepped in it and started doing great. Becky's the same way, you know. There's so many that if you've got that knowledge, you can take that to the driver's seat.
I think one of the best to transition from that is Cody Saucier. You know, you look at you look at how his career, you know, he started doing Monster Truck Madness 2 back in the day. You know, he started doing the virtual stuff, and now, you know, went from being one of the best crew guys for Damon Bradshaw into being, in my opinion, one of the best drivers to not, you know, he's won like the Young Guns championship, but not, you know, the World Finals. But he's one of the best pure drivers in this sport, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's lots of them. They know it inside out, and it helps.
Well, and you look at how the sport has evolved in the last 5 to 10 years. You know, I'm still gonna preach it to this day. I prefer nasty slap wheelies and badass sky wheelies. I will preach that till I'm blue in the face. I prefer that over the stoppies and the moonwalks, but not taking any away from that. It takes a obnoxious skill to balance an 11,000, 10,000 pound truck on its front two tires, like Tyler Menninger does it. You know, from when you were driving competitive race trucks to now, how do you think the sport's evolved, and where do you think it's going to head in the next 5 to 10 years again?
You know, it's hard to say where it'll go. You know, some people even say electric some years, and I honestly think that would be phenomenal, because then, you know, you take a nose walk and reverse the direction of the two sets or whatever. There could be some amazing potential there, but I don't know if it'll go over without the noise. But I still think there's a huge desire for the kind of tracks we ran in the, you know, 2008, 2010, where the obstacles were huge. And Throwdown still does that in Edmonton and all their events. And you see that, and the people respond to that. And I still prefer that, where you got to get over something. That's what monster trucks were about, to go where nobody else could go. I don't care for the tracks that are all dirt and, you know, a stock Yukon could go up and down those hills. It ain't going to sky it out. But you watch 10, 15 trucks hit that same jump over and over again versus a bus stack with cars and vans, and the shape of everything evolves to where it either gets better or worse, and it takes a, a talent to see what will and won't work. I think that's a better show in my opinion, but I think that'll still remain popular.
You mentioned the Throwdown Edmonton shows, and I've been going to that show for quite a long time at this point. And, I've seen them do a bunch of different layouts. I remember when they started kind of outside on, I think it was in the middle of turns 1 and 2, and raced into the infield before they took away the guards and did like a J hook. Like, I loved that track. Even what they did this year, even though it was just a simple straight line drag track, I loved it. And that's that I grew up in the Penda USA Motorsports days, and I still love a good old badass horsepower wins kind of track, and even their obstacles. Like, you look at how, like, the track for Throwdown in Edmonton, I think best bang for your buck, one of the best monster truck shows in Canada happens at Rad Torque Raceway, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I'd say the best one west of Toronto for sure. You get out east. Chris Orell, he puts on a phenomenal show usually out there in Montreal, and big obstacles as well. But I still think that challenging obstacles is going to remain popular. And Throwdown's not the only one doing it. There's a few other promoters that put on some really big stuff out there, and even this weekend in Calgary, it was the traditional pod in the middle, but they were working it. They were doing some pretty neat stuff and getting some big air.
Like, I remember when I went to World Finals this past year, and I think they learned a lot from the last couple of years doing the racing and freestyle in one day, and especially this last year. Freestyle, a lot of people were very disappointed how many trucks went out, like, 30 seconds, failed the run, crashed out early. There was only a handful, like Dalton being one of them in Jurassic Attack, filling his time and doing one hell of a run, and I think Monster Jam Feld's being smart by turning the Salt Lake World Finals this upcoming next year in 25 into a 2-day event.
Yeah, I think the Vegas history one, it was so big. It was a phenomenal event to be a part of many times. And I think a lot of fans are disappointed that it's not at that anymore. And, I definitely think that's a step in the right direction to go back to 2 days. Them trucks see a lot of abuse by the time they get to freestyle. And they just got to be maintained a little more in between, a little more time. That overnight will make a world of difference, I think. And it's an all or nothing event. You can't go out there and freestyle and think, oh, I got to run the clock out. You got to go hard right from the first second that light turns green if you want a shot at winning.
Well, and you look at, the last, this past World Finals that we just had, some of those trucks were competing in like 3 or almost all the competitions. You had the 2-wheel skills, the high jump, racing, and freestyle. They're competing in so many different events. And, you talk about the Vegas World Finals. It's still, I'm still going to regret never being able to get to one of those. And there's reasons why they can't do it at Sam Boyd. I think it's because of the Allegiant Stadium. I think they have a contract that no event's able to have it be held at Sam Boyd, which, it is what it is. But I feel like them going to the 2 days kind of brings back the nostalgia feel, and they're doing it right. And I hope if Monster Jam ever listens to these, if Phil ever listens to these, please, food at the pit party next year, please. That was the one thing that I feel like they failed on big time, is having no food at the damn pit party, because so many people, they only had people walking around with waters and beer and those Nestle Dibs things. That's all they had. And then from one of my buddies, Ryan Roberts, told me they had the hot dog vendors that, you know, show up after the events, they were outside just waiting and salivating. They're like, there's no food. We're going to make bank today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever, because I know they allowed some of the, you know, non-competing trucks at some point to go down the World Finals track. I know there's footage out there of Outlaw being able to go down Mike Harper's Outlaw, go down that track. Did you ever go down that track at all?
No, they never had that the years we were there. We were there probably 5 or 6 different times, and there was so much going on. It wasn't an option to even run one more truck. They just, I don't know, some years they had it, some they didn't, but all the ones we went, it wasn't an option, or we'd probably give it a kick at the can. I think we'd have done quite well, because most of those guys are all running the 2 speeds, and we still ran the 400s with the 3 speed. So we'd be able to go into that corner and drop a gear and still get a lot of bottom end out of it, where most of them guys, you know, they go in it with super tall gears and that's all they got. They go around that corner and it's just kind of a catch-up game after that. But we'd have been able to still carry some RPM out of it, I think.
So got a comment here from our good buddy Chris Kilbarger, and I don't know if you'd have any insight on this, but he's asking, back in the late 90s, my wife and I went to a county fair in Ohio and saw a grandstand event that they called a Canadian Thrill Show. It had 2 trucks, Maniac and a one-armed lady. Any insight? Did you know about that other Maniac truck?
No, I believe that truck was actually out of the state of Maine. So it was spelt like the state and called Maniac. The only other one I know of is, I think Mike Welsh had, when he had Super Pete and all that, I believe he had a driver that ran a truck called Maniac 1 or 2 weekends, but I don't think that would be that event.
Did you ever run with Mike Welch back in the day?
Oh yeah, quite a bit actually. Yeah.
See, I've talked to Mike a few times. He is such just an awesome dude, and you know, I love his enthusiasm still for the sport. You know, he's always going to the Hall of Fame and going down to Dennis Anderson's deal in North Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to see him in a new chassis with a Super Pete look. That would be worth traveling to watch it. But yeah, we still talk every now and then. He stopped in here for supper a couple of years ago. We went out and had some lunch, and he's one of them guys you need on this show, because he's got just a bank vault of stories that you wouldn't believe.
We had him on a couple of years ago, but I think it's about time to bring him back. You know, and you know, so do you remember, you know, Lindsay's, like, you've had quite a few different drivers and have their first show. Do you remember kind of like how like Lindsay's first show went, like that, like his reaction to hitting a set of cars? Like, do you remember some stuff like that?
Yeah, his first show was San Diego for Monster. I believe it was Monster Jam. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I remember they had this crazy long gap between a set of cars, and I also remember I was going to try and double it, and I come up short and kind of did a nose wheelie thing to get out of it. And then I remember Barefoot was there when they had that big Keith Black, and he didn't make it either, so then I didn't feel so bad. But Lindsay, his first round I think was against Terminator, and he actually won his first round of racing, and then I think he got beat shortly after that. But I remember, you know, for a rookie, I thought it was pretty good to beat anybody first round. And same with Nathan. I remember his first show was Anaheim, and he said he went out there thinking it was like the NASCAR car he had, where he didn't need earplugs, and he went out there and he's like, I just drove like a wimp until I could get back to the pits and find some earplugs. He goes, I didn't even want to get on the throttle.
So I'm just banning somebody that's putting spam comments in our YouTube chat. Like, for years, I never wore earplugs to monster truck shows, because I'm like, Even if I'm working around the trucks, I'm like, I just want to hear the horsepower. Blah.
Yeah.
And now I'm in my 30s. I'm like, yeah, nope, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm being smart because I eventually want kids and I want to be able to hear my kids.
Yeah, I've always been pretty cautious of that. Even on the farm, I just always liked the ear protection, and I really enforced it with all the drivers we had. I'm like, it's not worth it. There's too many of them old drivers out there that you talk to and they're like, "Come again? What?" And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy.
So I want to talk about your truck pulling days. You were doing that long before you got into the monsters. So how did you get into the truck pulling, and then that transition from truck pulling into monsters?
Well, it started with Dad on our little town of Foremost there. There was a time probably in the early 80s where there was probably at least 30 or 40 pulling vehicles out of that town. Everything from minis to multi-engine mods to super stocks. And so my first pulling on a real track was mini rod. We had a little 351 Cleveland mini puller. It seemed to have a lot of issues, but it was my first kick at the can kind of thing. And then Dad had an old Bronco, like the old 77 Bronco. It was a convertible. It was a pretty neat unit, but it tore up a lot of parts. And then he eventually got a diesel super stock, and that was a pretty big deal to everybody because there was only like 3 super stocks in the northwest Canadian part. There was one guy come out of Montana and one out of Saskatchewan, and just seeing them 3 on the track was a big deal because it was the most you'd ever see in one place. And then we started building the Maniac 4-wheel drive truck. It was a super mod, so it had a supercharger on it. And we used to have a hard time catching a truck at a Saskatchewan called the Bud Bandit. They're sponsored by Budweiser, had some pretty big money behind them. And we always fell about 10 feet short, it seemed like. And then we finally did that 3 more feet of wheelbase. And the first weekend out, we smoked them pretty good. We were pretty pleased with our results and changes. But anyway, it kind of went on to that. And then my brother, he was getting into it. He'd drive the super stock of Dad's once in a while, but he wanted his own unit. And so he bought a jet tractor with a Huey helicopter turbine in it. It'd shoot the big flame show and that. It was all show and a little less go, but it was very popular, because it'd shoot a 25-foot flame out the stack before he run. And so that got him invited to a lot of events. And, we crossed paths with a lot of monster truck guys, Ken Bikerites and Pablo. He did a lot of USA Motorsports stuff up here with King Crunch. And you'd get to know these guys, and they're a fun bunch. And my brother got invited to tractor pull and monster truck show. The first one was in Hawaii, and he went and did that. And then the next year they were doing Hawaii and Japan. And he took his puller over to Hawaii and came back with the Taurus truck. And I'm like, well, geez, that looks like you're having way more fun for your dollar, tractor pulling you last 30 seconds and you're done. And you just, run your equipment right to the max. And then, the monster trucks would go out there and get a couple minutes of freestyle and some racing and whatnot. And I'm like, I think that's a better fit for me. So about a year later, I ended up buying what was the Night Warrior from Mark Lindenberger in Kansas and put a supercharger on it, ran it as Night Warrior for one weekend, kind of for legal reasons. And then we switched it over to Maniac and kind of never looked back. Ended up pulling the supercharger off the the puller, because that class was sort of dying and it was all just injected stuff, made it a little easier to sell that. And about that time, Kirk actually went to work for Bigfoot for about 2 years. So I kind of traveled alone at first, and then me and Marvin traveled a bit, and then me and Marvin and Byron all traveled as a kind of a clan there for a bit. Did a lot of northern US stuff, kind of from Washington to North and South Dakota.
See, my favorite iteration of Maniac is when you had like the technically what they call the OBS body. The like 90, like trying to think what year that would be. It's before you switch over like the Super Duty style.
No, that as a 96.
Yeah, the 96 style Ford. Like I
Yeah.
love that. I love those older Ford bodies.
Yeah.
And how did you come up? So that Super Duty body you had, how did you come up with like the logo, the I think it looks like a jester dude on the side. I think it looks like I call it a jester. How did you come up
it's
with
kind of
the
like
design?
I just honestly, after Blake had done such a phenomenal job on Jurassic Attack, I just said I wanted something loud. I want it to have purple in it, and I want something that's going to stand out to the crowd. And just like he did with Jurassic, he said, "Go away and don't come back till it's done." And you just trust the guy, and I 100% did. The first one, we were pretty nervous because he wouldn't even show us where he was going with it. Like, we didn't know if it was going to have scales or elephant looking skin. You don't know. Nobody knows what dinosaurs truly looked like. We'd get people, "Oh, it's blue." Well, how many dinosaurs have you seen? How do you know what color they are, right? Like, and so we just 100% said, "Do whatever you want. We'll be back in 2 weeks." And as always, he didn't disappoint at all.
And then one of my other kind of last questions: how is having the cantilevers? I know Dan Patrick ran cantilevers for many years. Up until he stepped out of the driver's seat, and Rick's obviously driving that truck now. But how was the cantilevers back in the day?
I mean, it was the ideal thing for the Penda type racing, and Dan did a lot of that. And I assumed it was probably the better way to go, and in many ways it was. But it also had some disadvantages. Like in freestyle, you'd hit a van stack, and the next guy might get, say 2 feet above the van. Well, with that cantilever, it would just follow it like it was tracing the top of the van. It had 36 inches of travel, and it worked great. It was a smooth ride. You could, on them Penda type tracks, you could just pin it and never let off. But for freestyle, it just kind of took that away a bit. And the other side, the reason I got away from it was it was just high maintenance. You run a shock at a couple 100 pounds normally. Well, on that cantilever, you start at ride height at about 800 pounds. So you can just imagine what that spike into under full compression. So we were having to redo seals and stuff quite often compared to the other trucks. And it just kind of got old. So I never really noticed a big difference after getting rid of it, as far as, placing or doing well in racing, and that is a little more hoppy, like into a donut or something like that. So it seemed to be an improvement that way too. But there was nothing wrong with it, that's for sure.
And then my last question, I've always wanted to know about this. Your team was the only monster truck team that I've known that was sponsored by sunflower seeds. So in Canada, we have a brand of sunflower seeds called Spitz, and Don's team was sponsored by Spitz sunflower seeds. How did that come about? Because I always thought that was the most random sponsor for a monster truck team.
It's like anything. It's something that's easy to give lots of product out, and that's sponsors care about impressions and getting product to the people. And that was an easy fit. But the history, that's kind of a long and funny story. That guy that started Spitz, he was actually from Holland, and he had some kind of a grant from over there to start this company, even though it was in Canada. And he was about 20 miles up the road from us. And early on, he'd actually contracted Dad to grow sunflower seeds. And that went okay. And then when it came time to sell them to him, I don't know, they got in some kind of fight. We ended up hauling them to the States. And I'm like, well, that'll never be an opportunity there again. And then, you know, it's a pretty tight community when you're only 20 miles away. And so we'd cross paths often at the lake jet skiing. His kids would be out there, and I'd be like, here, try my stand-up. They're more fun than those sit-downs and this and that. And we always knew him. And then actually my wife worked there for about a year on the assembly line part of it. And so that was the time we were kind of going full-time and moved up here to Lethbridge. And we were doing some major changes. We had some sponsors on board to paint the hauler for us. And so they painted the whole semi and trailer. And, you know, we had that big airbrush trailer. And we just had to find a name to put on it that would pay for all that. And we ended up getting a hold of Spitz again. And like I say, I knew the guy. We'd crossed paths quite a bit. And it all just came together and fit on that trailer good and on the trucks. And, you know, Lindsay had it on the bottom where if he did a slap wheelie, everybody could see it. And it just turned out to be a great partnership. And originally it was just to cover the expenses on that trailer, but it went on for 7 more years. And, you know, I think it's probably the most sponsored monster truck team in Canadian history by far. But yeah, it was a great fit. We'd give out about 40,000 bags of them samples a year.
And you guys had cruise shirts, you had everything. And like Spitz still today is a big deal. You know, they're still around, and like so many people for the company I work with, you know, I always see Spitz in their trucks. And, you know, I was always just like, sunflower seeds and monster trucks. Who knew?
Yeah. And they got bought out by Pepsi since and moved everything. But yeah, one of the best stories about Spitz sunflower seeds was, you know, a lot of the teams would know we'd have cases and cases of them in the trailer. And we were at an event, I think it was in Utah somewhere. And there was one lonely beat up box in the bottom of the trailer. And Craig Christensen, he's like, I'm going to take that box with you. And I'm like, you don't want them. They're not for public use. And he's like, no, I'm taking these. Well, he gets down the road about an hour after this event, and he phones me on the cell phone, and he's like, what did you do to these? He goes, they taste like gear oil. And I'm like, well, they've been leaked on. That's why we told you couldn't have them. So we got the last laugh on that one, but we're like, we warned him, and he's like, no, I'm taking some of these with me. And I'm like, okay.
Spitz gear oil edition.
Yeah.
You know, again, Don, thank you for coming on. It was awesome to have you on, and we'll definitely have to do it again, you know, get some more stories. You know, you obviously you're still in the ride truck business with your Area 51 North ride truck. And where are you going to be for the rest of the year if, you know, we have any listeners and people here in Alberta?
Actually, we're pretty much done other than all of October, Fridays and Saturdays and Halloween and whatnot. We're at Screamfest at the Stampede grounds there in Calgary. And it's a phenomenal event. If you're into Halloween at all, it's a blast. We give one of the most aggressive rides we do anywhere out there in the dark. It's like pitch black, and all they see is us heading for these big semi trailers or bull chutes, and they think we're going to crash right into it. But That thing turns so phenomenal that it just changes directions in an instant. And yeah, it's a really fun event. So if you're into Halloween, that's the place to be.
Well, you heard it here first. And again, Don, just thank you for, back 2 years ago or so, let me drive your ride truck, and, hope to do it again sometime. Get behind the wheel of your new truck. And I still remember you telling me about your rear steer, you can't hold your rear steer.
Yeah. Actually, we got a new pump on. You can do that now.
Yeah.
I haven't even put self-centering on this new one. I don't rely on it anymore. So,
well, hey, I gotta definitely, hopefully next year get behind the wheel of that thing again. It'd be an awesome opportunity again. And we'll share your Facebook page for the ride truck. Any other social media besides that you guys have?
No, just the Facebook one right now.
And guys, I'm not too sure who we have on next week, but before we go, guys, check up on your friends and family. Mental health is very important. I put on last week, a week ago today was Suicide Awareness Day. It is Suicide Awareness Month. We have lost so many people by suicide, some in this industry as well. If you're struggling, going through anything, please reach out to somebody. Mental health is such an important thing, and we don't want to lose you. And as Cheech always says at the end of the podcast as well, donate blood is very important. If you're able to, go do it. It'll hopefully help save somebody's life. And guys, until next week, keep the rubber side down and the shiny side up, everybody. Peace.